Welcome to episode 13 of Extremely Non-Extreme. I am the host of the podcast, Quentin Wittrock. Our topic today is elections to be concluded on November 4th. Here in Minnesota, where I live, we have mayoral and school board races on our ballots, including hotly contested races in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The election getting the most attention, however, nationally is the mayor race in New York City, with considerable ink also being spilled, figuratively, because most ink isn't ink these days, on the open governorships in New Jersey and Virginia. To discuss the mayoral races today, I'm honored to have with me Michael Conway and Liam Conway in New York and David Brauer in Minneapolis. Mike works as a lawyer in New York City, and Liam is a student, and they both follow politics very closely in the city. David has been a Minneapolis-based writer and journalist for many years. Welcome to the program, Michael, Liam, and David.
Good morning,
We'll
Quentin.
start with New York, New York, the Big Apple, the Empire City, Gotham, the city that never sleeps, the home of the, well, Yankees. Uh, Thank you, Mike, for taking time away from your law practice to bring us up to speed on what's going on there. As of today, with current Mayor Eric Adams having dropped out of the race, not seeking reelection, there appear to be three remaining candidates of any significance: Zoran Mandami, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Silva. Zoran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Silva. Mike, who are these guys?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Quentin. It's good to talk to you again. And I'm a Dodgers fan, not a Yankees fan, so tonight's a big night for me. It could be the end of a wonderful run. Um, and one of the reasons that I invited Liam to join us is because Liam is a student, a political science student. He understands these things better than you or I. He's much smarter than us, as all the young folks will attest. They're smarter than the old folks. But the race right now, like you say, is big around the country, and the reason is, like me, most of the folks in the country didn't really expect Mandami to win the primary. Now, and one of the other reasons I asked Liam to join is he worked on that campaign. The difference really is Mandami is a young guy who really embodies what I see now with my four children as a growing movement across the country. Not a you hear Trump talk about Mandami as a communist. There's as you know, I'm sure there's no similarity between communism and socialism. But the young folks are more interested in certain issues that and I'm not going to get into all the issues. We don't have time for that. Issues that he seems to be, really behind and more vocal about than Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo obviously did some wonderful things for New York through the years, but he hasn't really changed. He seems to be picking up on some of the ideas that Mandani has about low interest housing, making sure that the rents are frozen. He's also talking about increasing the number of police officers on the streets. I think, the hot button in New York right now that is going to be the focal point of the campaign or the election. It's really no more, no, the campaign's really over. But Mandami has his views on the police in New York, and Cuomo has his views. And I think what Cuomo's folks have been pushing is Cuomo is going to increase the police force, strengthen the police force, and people perceive Mandami as being different from that. I don't think Mandami, if he's elected, is ever going to satisfy anybody in that score. He's either not going to do enough to dismantle the police. He's not going to do enough to increase the strength of the police force or make it a cooperative environment in that regard. But that's where I think the big difference is. Now we've also got a third candidate who's sort of the Republican candidate really is not a factor in the race, in my opinion. Uh, I'm sort of offended by his use of the guardian angels as his mantra. Having grown up like you, uh, the guardian angels were a big deal in the 70s, and they were out there protecting the folks who needed to be protected, the folks who if you're walking down the street and somebody tried to attack you, you can see a guardian angel where I grew up in Los Angeles jump out and try and stop that from happening. I'm not sure that's what the guardian angels represent right now. So I get a little offended by
The other
that
tag
campaign.
Mr. Silva has on him is Republican, and that doesn't do too much for him in New York City either. Liam, let me ask
Yeah.
you, Mr. Mamdani is the one that's received the most attention here in flyover country. Is he going to win for sure? Despite the fact that he's 34 years old, he's an avowed Democratic Socialist, he's running against a famous or infamous former state governor whose father also was the state governor. How has Mr. Mandami built this popularity?
That's something I'd like Liam to address
Yeah,
since he
I'd
knows him a
like
little bit
Liam to
better.
address that.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Good.
Yeah,
I think Mamdani will definitely. I mean, I was right before this call started. I made a point to check the latest polls. Mamdani's up 48% compared to I think Cuomo was at like 30 something, and Schley was a non-entity. I think there is no doubt in my mind that Mamdani will win. I think it goes to a point my father was saying earlier. Mamdani talks about the economy. I mean, he's a very different man than a Bill Clinton, but the focus, the whole idea of it's the economy, stupid, is still there. New Yorkers clearly feel something's up. They feel it in their wallets, they feel it in their everyday lives, and they want something new. But I also think, and this is the point that I think a lot of people don't really talk about, Mamdani had the organization even as a socialist, and I'd say argue because he is a socialist, because of the party such as the Working Families Party, the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, who were able to essentially get this campaign going years in advance. I mean, he started as a state assemblyman in 2021, but both parties have been trying to get a good candidate for mayor for about a decade now. Obviously, both parties also had significant differences with Cuomo when he was governor. That organization just isn't present in the Cuomo or Sliwa campaigns, and very much was not present in the Adams campaign. I mean, even now, we see that the anti-Mamdani candidates haven't even dropped out to unite. Whereas with Mamdani in the primaries, all the Working Families Party endorsed candidates by the end of the race endorsed each other. They united. Famously, Brad Lander asked his people voting for him to put Mamdani second, which almost certainly propelled Mamdani in a good amount of places. I think Mamdani's unity, he has the organization, and he has his pulse on what the city wants.
Liam, it must be more than just the young and the impoverished New Yorkers who are supporting Mr. Mamdani. He must have broader support than that, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he very much does. I think people like to talk about, obviously the youth support because it is so striking. But if you look at the polls from the primary, you'll see a lot of groups came out from Mamdani. One group I would like to mention in particular, because I think it's a interesting point of how New York politics works, is Chinese Americans. Mamdani, early on his primary campaign, sought an endorsement from John Liu, who was a state senator, the first Asian state senator in New York history. John Liu holds a considerable amount of influence over the Chinese American population in New York City. When Mamdani got that, Mamdani won a vast majority of Chinese Americans. Cuomo and Sliwa did not try that. And that's, one would assume that wouldn't be the case. Chinese Americans are not by and large known to, be particularly left wing, but, Mamdani was able to get that group by, going out there, which, and talking to them. I think many other we saw. I know Cuomo has obviously in primaries got a majority of black voters over 40, but Mamdani got black voters under 40. I think it's a very wide-ranging coalition.
I was
Interesting.
surprised how many of the elder folks like me in New York are supporting Mandami. It just seemed, out of. I didn't expect it, and I'm not sure why that is. You can explain, like Liam did, the Chinese American coalition, the under 40 coalition, but there's a lot of folks that are over 40 that are voting for Mandami, and I'm not sure exactly what the motivation is, but I think a lot of it is just this promise of potentially lifting them from their impoverished status to a status where, if not, you know, uh, wealthy, at least I can put food on the table at night. And that promise is a promise, as Liam said, Bill Clinton focused on. It's the economy, stupid. We need to put food on the table. And I don't think we can look at the over 40 crowd as a coalition because there just aren't as many. But I was surprised at the number of over 40 folks that are voting for Mundum.
Interesting. Speaking of New Yorkers and people over 40, President Trump, he called off the federal prosecution of Mayor Eric Adams, but he now seems to favor lifelong Democrat Andrew Cuomo even over the Republican. Uh, and President Trump has warned New Yorkers not to vote for Mamdani. At least that's the way I read his cage rattling, lest there be consequences. The president is not so subtly implying that a vote for Mamdani is a vote for retribution by the Trump administration. Mike or Liam, are New Yorkers showing any concern about that? I know it's being played in the press as setting up a confrontation between New York City and Washington, D.C.
Well, I guess what I would say is one, I think Trump recognizes that a Republican vote is a wasted vote in New York City. So certainly he's more interested in seeing Cuomo win, but I think that I'm I'm not sure that that's going to make any difference at all. Cuomo and Trump have had their fair share of controversy. I don't see Cuomo as being an Adams type figure who bends the knee to President Trump. And I think that if he's elected, we're going to have the exact same consequences. The consequences are going to be, a withdrawal of funding and the troop movements into New York. Those are the same consequences he sort of alludes to. If Mandami wins, that's what he'll do. Well, you know what? He's going to do it anyway. And I'm not sure what Cuomo's view is because he's not as vocal now. He wants that support. He doesn't want to disavow that support of President Trump. But I do believe that in the end, uh, if elected, he'll have his fair share of controversies that bring in the troops. They're coming in.
No.
We're going to be just like Chicago, just like Portland, just like Los Angeles. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also say that I think arguably Trump support of Cuomo might hurt. It might. The only thing that voters really care is that it's going to hurt Cuomo. I mean, the primary we saw both candidates try to position themselves as the candidate who will fight Trump most. If Trump's openly supporting one of them, that really only hurts them. And obviously, again, like my father said, everyone knows Sliwa isn't getting it.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you
it doesn't
both
matter.
very much, Mike and Liam. We'll be watching the New York race closely. Thank you for coming on the podcast to provide us your insider views on what's going on from your perspective. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us, and I look forward to listening to what's going on in Minneapolis next.
All right.
Take care.
Yep. David, first of all, you can chime in on anything that was said about New York. I'm sure you follow that race closely too. Do you have anything to add on New York?
Well, I know a lot of people, maybe you, for pairing these cities together, see a lot of parallels. I would encourage people to pump the brakes a little bit on those parallels. It's true that there's an incumbent who's been on the conservative end of the Democratic spectrum and a primary challenger who is endorsed by, in our case, the Democratic Socialists. But unlike New York, uh, the incumbent, Jacob Fry, who's a two-term mayor running for his third and what he says final term, is not a damaged politician. It's true that his popularity is underwater, even according to polls that political action committees that are spending over $1 million on his behalf have done. But Fry is a talented politician, and he is not necessarily someone who's beset by scandals or someone who is, underwater that way. Uh, he has his base. His base, from what I can tell, for the most part, is sticking with him. Meanwhile, Omar Fateh, the Democratic Socialist endorsed but DFL state senator, has worked an impressive campaign. He's got less than half the money of Jacob Fry and much less independent money support from special interests and wealthy people. Yet he's a plausible winner. I wouldn't call him the favorite necessarily, but honestly, I have a low confidence and my crystal ball is a little opaque. Um, Unlike New York, we don't have public financing. One of the unsung factors in New York with Mamdani is that they do have public financing. And in fact, Mamdani qualified for it and Cuomo did not. And Mamdani's been able to keep a full campaign on TV using social media, using TikTok, using all the techniques. Uh, the candidates here, who also include Reverend Dwayne Davis, who's a minister at a large and involved liberal congregation south of downtown, and Jazz Hampton, who's an entrepreneur from Southwest Minneapolis. They have not had enough money to do any sort of TV. TV's not as powerful as it used to be, but it is with older voters. They just don't have the resources to do the polling and all of the other things, the paid door knockers who have been working for Fry's PACs. So it's still, I would say, an uphill battle for Fry's challenger. I would say he's still the favorite. He's won by double digits, although low double digits in both of his races, his initial election in 2017 and his victory in 2021. The other thing that's different is that we have ranked choice voting for our general election and New York does not. And typically, Fry has never won a majority of first choice votes. It's not that easy to do in a ranked choice system anyway, but he's always won with second and third choices. And even though the three challengers have run sort of a combined campaign, a rank all three campaign, voters do not fall in line like politicians sometimes wish they did. And so the reason I consider Fry the favorite is that his first choice votes may be diminished here because a couple of the challengers just to his left are more attractive than in past years. But there may still be enough voters who rank him second or third or rank him ahead of Fateh, who's considered his likeliest challenger, that he could still pull out a win and maybe a comfortable win on November 4th.
So I saw something you wrote recently for your followers about the race, and you had ranked Dwayne Davis, the minister, and Jazz Hampton, the entrepreneur, as your two personal favorites, rather than either Fateh or Fry or anyone else. Why is that? And do those two gentlemen have any chance on Tuesday?
Right. Well, the reason I rank them one and two is that in the case of Dwayne Davis, he's probably closest to my overall positions. I consider myself a longtime DFLer, but I'm also not afraid of the DSA. I think there's a lot of energy and good policies, and I think anybody who's our age as Quentin, at their peril, doesn't realize how the younger generation feels about government involvement, whether the private sector has created fairly distributed wealth, and all of that. So I consider myself in alliance with the Democratic Socialists and people even to their left, even though I'm not a member of their group. So for me, Dwayne Davis is almost, I would say, an Elizabeth Warren figure in this race. He's not Bernie Sanders. He's not Joe Biden or Rahm Emanuel or somebody to the right of the Democratic center. And so he just fits my politics the best. Jazz Hampton is arguably policy-wise, I don't think he'd be a whole lot different than Jacob Frey. But temperamentally, he's worlds different. And what I see in the city, and I think maybe a lot of people who listen to your podcast do too, is a really strong divide between the more corporate friendly, public safety, police especially obsessed Democrats and the socialists who we've seen in Mamdani and all that. My personal belief, my politics would tell you that I think Frey's faction has played up those differences because that is a way to get a bare majority of the city, or at least it has been. And it stoked the divide. The socialist policies, I think, increase a divide, especially among center left or moderate people, because some of them are controversial. Rent control here is controversial. The defund the police question, which was on our ballot 4 years ago, which I would argue did not mean getting rid of the police. It meant shifting how we do public safety, is still very controversial. But what would happen, I think, if especially if Frey wins, and almost certainly if Bate wins, not of his own devising, is that we'd still have a bitterly divided city, and a lot of teeth baring and staring across a large divide. And I think Davis and Hampton, both temperamentally and in some cases positionally, have a better chance. It's still an uphill battle to bring people who feel like me and people maybe to a little bit to the left of me and people who are to the right of me, but still in the Democratic coalition together. We just need to have politicians who don't play up divides. And I feel that is one of the tragedies of Jacob Frey.
Jacob Frey, of course, has been the mayor for 2 full terms now. And that means he was the mayor of Minneapolis during George Floyd and the other police incidents, Black Lives Matter, the COVID, and all the other issues that have happened in Minneapolis under his reign. And he's led the city through those. Does he come out unscathed by those? Do they help him or hurt him that he's the incumbent?
Well, I would argue that Frey famously in 2021 walked through a crowd of Black Lives Matter protesters. Uh, I don't know, sort of trying to bond with them, I think. And they basically chanted, "Jacob, go home." And Jacob said, I will, but I'm not going to defund or get rid of the police. And I think he sincerely believed that. I think that was a heartfelt thing. And I think that's what frankly got him reelected, because question two, the public safety question, was, I think, confusing. It was misrepresented, but it was also, as lawyers would say, poorly drafted. And bad cases make bad law. And so the public basically sided with Jacob Frey. And the lesson that politicians, or frankly anybody who achieves victory under those circumstances, is, why should I change? And so for Frey, he found very fruitful politics in continuing to paint people who are opposed to him as extreme as possible, more extreme, I would argue, than they were. There was a backlash in 2023, a very progressive council, majority, supermajority, in fact, that could override Frey's vetoes. 5, I think, conventionally Democratic members and 4 that had been endorsed by the DSA, we have 13 on the council, took charge. And for Frey, on some level, maybe it was something he wished for, because he was able once again to run against a majority that he claimed was extreme. Now, I think a lot of what that council has done, the current incumbent council has done, is absolutely not extreme. We have the largest police force we've had since George Floyd Square. They approved the contract. The police got gigantic raises. They approved that contract, not without some gnashing of teeth. But so I think Frey wasn't necessarily dinged by George Floyd because he was successful in telling people that he was the change agent and the other people who were portraying themselves as the change agent were a change too far. He famously wept on George Floyd's casket. He has a political base on the North Side, which is the part of town with the most African American population in Minneapolis. And, that's frankly been an area of strength for him. Now, it's a little unclear whether it's the white homeowners who vote on the North Side or the average person who would tend to be a person of color, but it's still part of his coalition, and you can factually point
Interesting.
to that.
Let's turn to the broader impact of the Minneapolis race and the New York race. I'm sure, David, you know that Minnesotans outside Minneapolis itself, as are people all around the country, watching these races closely. Uh, Whether we can't vote in those races or not, and we don't live in those cities. And most of the listeners of this podcast fall into that category. But the reason we're paying close attention is because candidates running in next year's 2026 races, midterm elections, are drawing attention to your race and the New York race. And I'm thinking primarily of Republicans casting all Democratic politicians now as socialists, and traditional Democrats also are warning that we can't go so far to the left or it'll kill us in 2026. In statewide elections or in any place other than Minneapolis and New York that is purpler than Minneapolis or New York. If Mr. Fateh wins in Minneapolis and Mr. Mamdani wins in New York, I predict a lot of political posturing around that. Your thoughts on the broader political implications for outside those two cities?
Well, much like your guest from New York City said, Trump's going to invade anyway, regardless of who wins out there. I would say that regardless of who wins in Minneapolis, there's still going to be a fight between the traditional bigger money Democrats, the older Democrats, frankly, and the new aspect of the party and the new, more resurgent left. Look, Tim Walz endorsed Jacob Fry. Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota and ran for vice president on Kamala Harris's ticket last year. I think he did that partly because they have a relationship, although it was kind of caustic during the post George Floyd murder uprising. But I also think Walz views a FATA victory as something that would hurt him statewide running for reelection next year. Now, whether that's right or not, I can't say. Politics is a matter of perception. And if FATA wins, there will be a huge controversy in Minneapolis. And I think, again, as somebody who considers himself a social democrat, a center leftist, I've been disappointed, frankly, not in how the mainstream media, the traditional newspapers, et cetera, question the policies of socialism because they deserve to be questioned, but how they make them out to be so much more extreme or so much more different than things that, say, FDR was doing. So I guess the short answer to your question is it may hurt the Democrats statewide in Minnesota. However, they also have to be worried about alienating the younger left energetic voters who provide the door knockers. They don't provide the money necessarily, but they provide the energy and the votes of marginal Democrats who do tend to, you really need in a statewide election. I'll just point you to one data point. One of the reasons Kamala Harris lost, she won Minnesota, but one of the reasons that she lost was she lost a lot of Muslim votes in the center city. She lost left votes who were protesting over Gaza. In Minneapolis, the precinct with Cedar Riverside, which is a large multi-unit housing area that contains a lot of new Americans, including a lot of Somali Americans, their precinct, which is a big precinct, but it lost over 1,000 votes. They just disappeared. They didn't show up in 2024. Now, that was offset by Harris getting additional votes in the wealthy parts of Minneapolis and the wealthy suburbs of Minneapolis. And that's because people who used to be traditional Republicans, maybe clients of your firm that would have voted Republican, would have voted for Mitt Romney or John McCain, somebody like that. They have migrated toward the Joe Biden-esque figures, and that is just accelerating. So
I would
I think
argue they've migrated away from Donald Trump type figures.
that as well. The only reason I would add what I added is that I think they were doing that before. The Tea Party, I think, moved a lot of Republicans who were more moderate and more traditional away. Marjorie Taylor Greenes, those kind of people. Now, it could be those voters. It's very plausible to say that those voters would look at a Mamdani or a Fateh and say, well, now we're trapped. Now who do we go for? The truth is, the governor of Minnesota, Democratic nominee, is going to be Tim Walz. He's a figure who has traditionally appealed to a broader coalition, and that's why he's been elected. He will have the winds of Trump invasion, repression, unconstitutionality at his back. At the same time, his government is beset with allegations that a lot of money that was pumped out during COVID was delivered fraudulently. And Trump's attorney general in Minnesota, who is not a raving lunatic, has done a very good job, and appropriate, I would argue, on some level, of keeping the focus on mispayments and fraud in Minnesota. So there are some issues, legitimate issues, that Tim Walz will have to confront. I don't think he wants to confront a left issue, but he doesn't want to lose left voters.
Excellent. That is a very, very good summary, David. I admire your expertise on this topic as well as many others. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'll let you drop off, and then I'll continue on with the rest of the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. So this is the first time I'll have somewhat of a monologue on the podcast, and I'll mention first St. Paul. And like Jacob Fry in Minneapolis, St. Paul incumbent Melvin Carter is running for a third term as mayor there. One opponent is his former policy director, State Rep Kaholi Hur. And that race has been hotly contested. There are other candidates as well, like there are in Minneapolis. So we'll be watching that closely. On all of these, I'll have a post-election post on my blog at principle-based-politics.org shortly after the results are in. I want to talk a little bit about the two states that are holding statewide elections on Tuesday in an odd-numbered year, and those are New Jersey and Virginia. The current governors in both New Jersey and Virginia are ineligible to run due to term limits. And the race to become the new governor of New Jersey is particularly hotly contested, with Democrat Mikey Sherrill facing off against Republican Jack Ciattarelli. In some ways, this race is a referendum, as all things are in politics nowadays, on President Trump. President Trump lost New Jersey by 6 points in 2024 compared to a 16-point loss there in 2020. So he was gaining in popularity in New Jersey. And Mr. Ciattarelli, as a businessman, a former state legislator, and he is actually embracing the Trump presidency, while Ms. Sherrill, who is a current congresswoman with a military and prosecutorial background, is, of course, bashing the administration. So this is somewhat of a proxy vote for the popularity of Republicanism in general and MAGA and Trumpism in particular, to see how that race comes out. It's very similar situation in Virginia. There, in the gubernatorial race, Winsome Earl Sears is running against Abigail Spanberger. Spanberger is a former CIA officer and a fourth-term Democratic member of Congress. It'll be interesting to see whether Ms. Spanberger, the Democrat, is hurt by her party's candidate for Attorney General, a guy named Jay Jones. Maybe you've heard about Jay Jones, but it has come to light that he sent texts a while back to fellow Democrats saying that if he got a chance, he would put two bullets in the head of the then Republican Speaker of the House in Virginia. Of course, as there's been a lot more emphasis on the scourge of political violence in America, this looks very, very bad for Mr. Jones. Now, he won't withdraw. And so, one issue in the case is whether Abigail Spanberger should be calling on him to withdraw, whether uh, he should be kicked out of the Democratic Party or whatever. Ms. Earl Sears is an interesting candidate as well. She's the current lieutenant governor of Virginia and a Marine Corps veteran. She's an immigrant from Jamaica, and she has not been endorsed by President Trump. President Trump, of course, is leading the federal government, which is shut down right now. That affects a lot of people in Virginia who work for the federal government. And so it's interesting to see how Trump's non-endorsement will help or hurt Ms. Earl Sears. So she's also raised less than half as much money as Ms. Spanberger, and Ms. Spanberger is favored to win. But I'll be watching that outcome closely to see how close it is and to see what voters say in their exit polls in Virginia. As far as the United States Congress, as most of you know, there are elections there for every House of Representatives seat in every even number year. 2025 being an odd number year, there normally wouldn't be any U.S. Congress races this year. But there is one. It's in the 18th District of Texas. And the reason for that is the person who was in that seat, a Democrat, passed away. And so there is an open seat that will be filled on the same election day, November 4th, as all of the other races that we have been following. And I will let you know how that comes because, as you know, the United States Congress is virtually deadlocked, and each one of these races takes on greater significance as a result of that. Again, I will have a blog post coming out as soon as the election results are known. With the ranked choice voting in some places, election results won't be known until later, and I may not wait for that because I know you'll be eager to hear the results in places like Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City. So you can look for more pre-election analysis in the next day or two as I put out a pre-election blog post at principlebasedpolitics.org. And then at that same principlebasedpolitics.org, after the election, I'll let everyone know how the races came out. That will appear on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. So I hope you will sign up for my emails at principlebasedpolitics.org, in which case you will receive my blog post links as well as my podcast links. Thank you all for your attention. And again, I thank my guests, David Brauer in Minneapolis and Michael and Liam Conway in New York for their participation in today's program. Have a good day, everyone, and be well out there. I hope if you're in the cities that are involved, you have been voting or vote now. Thank you.